Have you ever looked around your life and quietly asked yourself a question you never said out loud? How did I get here? Not because your life is falling apart. Not because everything is terrible. But because somewhere deep inside you, there is a voice that refuses to believe this is all your life was meant to become. Let me tell you something. The most dangerous place a human being can live is not in failure. It is in comfort that slowly steals ambition. It is waking up every morning, doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, carrying the same excuses, until one day you realize years have disappeared while your dreams remained exactly where you left them. Think about this for a moment. Life rarely changes because of one dramatic event. It changes because of the principles you practice when nobody is watching. The world celebrates moments. Life rewards habits. Those are two completely different things. I met a man years ago who spent nearly 25 years working in the same small repair shop. Every day he unlocked the same door before sunrise. Every evening he locked it after sunset. People believed he had accepted an ordinary life. They felt sorry for him, but they misunderstood him. Because while everyone saw routine, he saw preparation. Every day before work, he spent 1 hour learning something new. Not because anyone asked him, not because anyone would promote him, not because anyone applauded him, simply because he made a decision. He refused to become the same person 2 days in a row, 1 hour every single morning. At first, nothing changed. His income stayed the same. His house stayed the same. His old truck still made strange noises. His friends laughed. Why are you studying? You're too old. You'll never use that. What difference will 1 hour make? Interesting question. What difference does 1 hour make? Here's what most people don't understand. 1 hour never changes your life. Thousands of hours do. One workout doesn't transform a body. One book doesn't transform a mind. One conversation doesn't transform a relationship. But every transformation you've ever admired began with something that looked completely insignificant. That's the mystery of life. Greatness always hides inside ordinary actions. Success is whispers before it ever shouts. The tree that eventually provides shade for generations begins as something a child could accidentally step on without noticing. Your future works exactly the same way. People keep searching for dramatic breakthroughs. Life keeps offering quiet disciplines. And because those disciplines appear ordinary, people ignore them. Years later, they wonder why extraordinary results never arrived. I learned something years ago. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 month, then underestimate what they can become in 10 years. Think about that. Someone decides to learn a new skill. After 3 weeks, they say, this isn't working. Someone starts exercising. 2 weeks later, no visible results. Someone begins saving money. 3 months later, what's the point? Because we have become addicted to immediate evidence. But principles don't reward impatience. Principles reward consistency. Imagine placing 1 drop of water onto a stone. Nothing happens. Another drop, still nothing. 1,000 drops, the stone appears unchanged. 10,000 drops later, the stone begins carrying the signature of persistence. Not because water became stronger, because consistency defeated resistance. Your character forms exactly like that. Your confidence develops exactly like that. Your discipline grows exactly like that. Not through intensity, through repetition. Let me ask you something. If someone handed you $1 million today, would your life change? Of course. But only temporarily if your principles remain the same. Because money amplifies character. It doesn't replace it. A person without discipline simply finds larger ways to become distracted. A person without wisdom simply makes more expensive mistakes. A person without purpose simply feels emptier inside a larger house. That's why changing circumstances before changing yourself is like repainting a cracked foundation. The color changes, the structure doesn't. Here's what most people don't understand. You are not building a successful life. You're building the person capable of creating one. Those are different projects. Everyone wants the results. Very few are willing to become the person those results require. There was a young woman who dreamed of becoming an architect. She carried sketchbooks everywhere. Beautiful ideas. Wonderful imagination. Years passed. Nothing happened. Not because she lacked talent, because every evening she waited until she felt inspired. Sometimes inspiration visited. Most days it didn't. One afternoon she met an elderly builder. His hands were rough. His clothes carried dust from decades of construction. He looked at her drawings and smiled. Then he asked one question. Do you build when inspiration arrives, or do you build until inspiration arrives? Everything changed. She stopped waiting. Every morning, she worked, whether she felt creative or not, whether she felt confident or not, whether anyone believed in her or not. Years later, people admired her success. They called her gifted. They called her fortunate. They never saw the mornings when motivation never showed up, but commitment did. Think about this. The bridge between dreams and reality is rarely excitement. It is responsibility. Because excitement is emotional. Responsibility is intentional. One disappears with your mood. The other survives your mood. That's why principles matter. Your feelings change. Your principles guide you anyway. You don't need to feel disciplined to act with discipline. You don't need to feel courageous to take courageous action. You don't need confidence before beginning. Confidence often arrives because you began, not before life has an unusual way of rewarding movement. Imagine standing at the bottom of a mountain before sunrise. Everything is dark. You can only see a few steps ahead. If you refuse to move until you can see the entire path, you'll stand there forever. But if you trust those first few visible steps, the path keeps revealing itself. Life doesn't usually illuminate the whole journey. It illuminates enough for the next decision. That requires faith, not necessarily religious faith. Faith in growth, faith in effort. Faith that today's invisible investment becomes tomorrow's visible reality. I remember meeting an old gardener who never hurried. People wondered why his garden looked so alive, flowers everywhere. Healthy trees, fruit hanging from branches, children loved visiting. Someone asked him his secret. He laughed. There isn't one. Then he pointed toward a tiny seed. You call this small. Nature calls it enough. Those words stayed with me because we spend our lives calling our efforts too small. One page, one workout, one conversation, one apology, one lesson, $1 saved. One decision, too small. Nature disagrees. Nature says, keep planting, because harvests don't appear after planting one seed. They appear after honoring the principle. That's where many lives quietly fall apart. People abandon principles because they don't see immediate harvests. Imagine digging a well. Day after day you hit dry soil. Your hands ache. Friends laugh. You've wasted enough time. So you stop unhuno to you. Water waited 3 feet below. How many dreams have ended 3 feet before breakthrough? How many businesses closed one season too early? How many marriages could have healed through one more honest conversation? How many books remained unwritten because their authors confused temporary frustration with permanent failure? Here's what most people don't understand. Pain speaks loudly, progress whispers. When you're becoming stronger, you rarely feel stronger. When you're becoming wiser, you rarely notice wisdom growing. Growth often disguises itself as inconvenience. That's why ordinary people quit. They mistake the discomfort of development for evidence they're on the wrong path. The athlete feels sore. The student feels overwhelmed. The entrepreneur feels uncertain. The parent feels exhausted. The artist feels misunderstood. And because discomfort arrives, they assume they're failing. No, sometimes discomfort is simply proof You're expanding beyond yesterday's identity. A butterfly would probably describe transformation as destruction. Everything familiar disappears. The old form dissolves. Nothing feels stable. Imagine leaving the cocoon halfway through because change became uncomfortable. You'd never discover the wings waiting on the other side. Many people abandon personal growth exactly there. Not because transformation isn't happening. Because transformation doesn't always feel beautiful while it's happening. Let me tell you another principle. Protect your attention as if your future depends on it. Because it does. Attention is becoming one of the rarest resources in the modern world. Everyone wants a piece of it. Advertisements, notifications, opinions, argument, breaking news, entertainment, comparison, fear. Someone is always trying to rent space inside your mind. The question is, who owns your thoughts? Imagine your mind as a magnificent garden. Every conversation plants something. Every book plants something. Every video plants something. Every friendship plants something. Now imagine allowing strangers to scatter random seeds across your garden every single day. Would you be surprised if weeds appeared? Of course not. Yet people do exactly that with their minds. Then wonder why peace feels so difficult to find. I once watched an old violin maker work in complete silence. Horse passed, no music. Only careful hands, every movement intentional. Someone asked him why he never rushed. He smiled without looking up. If I hurry this part, the instrument will sing poorly for decades. That answer wasn't only about violins. It was about people. Every hurried decision leaves echoes. Every thoughtful decision creates harmony you'll hear long after the moment has passed. Principles teach you to think beyond today. That's maturity. Children ask, what do I want now? Wisdom asks, what kind of life am I creating? Those questions produce completely different futures. Think about this for a moment. Every action casts two shadows. One appears immediately. The other appears years later. Eating healthy today may feel inconvenient now. Its second shadow might be energy 20 years from now. Learning a new skill today may seem slow. Its second shadow may become opportunity when others are unprepared. Speaking kindly to someone today may seem ordinary. Its second shadow could become a lifelong friendship. The tragedy is that most people judge principles by their first shadow instead of their second. And because the immediate reward feels small, they never stay long enough to witness what patient living can create. There was a father who wanted his son to become responsible. Instead of giving endless lectures, every Saturday morning he invited the boy to help repair old bicycles they found abandoned. The son complained, "This is boring." The father simply smiled and kept working. Weeks became months. Months became years. The bicycles improved. Then something unexpected happened. The boy began repairing things that had nothing to do with bicycles. Broken fences, old furniture, neighbors' tools. One day he said something remarkable. "I guess I just don't like leaving broken things broken." His father nodded quietly, because the lessons had never been about bicycles. It had been about identity. That's another principle. You become what you repeatedly practice, not what you occasionally admire, not what you post online, not what you promise every New Year's Day. You become what your ordinary Tuesdays reveal, because ordinary days write extraordinary destinies. People often wait for perfect seasons, perfect timing, perfect confidence, perfect circumstances. Yet life keeps whispering, begin where you are, use what you have, become who you're capable of becoming from this very moment, because perfection has delayed more dreams than failure ever has. And once you understand that, another realization begins to unfold, one that changes the way you look at every setback you've ever experienced. Because what if the obstacles you spent years trying to avoid were quietly teaching you the very principles your future will one day depend on? Think about the seasons of your own life for a moment. Think about the conversations that hurt, the opportunities that disappeared, the mornings you questioned your own ability, because sometimes the lesson is never hiding inside the victory. Sometimes it is hidden inside the road that almost made you turn around, and that's where something remarkable begins to happen, because the person who learns to see difficulty as a classroom instead of a prison starts making decisions that everyone else overlooks. Let me explain what I mean. There is a difference between experiencing difficulty and becoming defined by difficulty. One shapes you, the other traps you. And the choice between the two is rarely made in one dramatic moment. It is made quietly, in the privacy of your own mind, every single day. You wake up, something doesn't go according to plan. Maybe the opportunity disappears. Maybe someone disappoints you. Maybe you gave everything you had and still didn't receive the result you hoped for. Now you stand at a crossroads that no one else can see. One road whispers, "This is proof you should stop." The other whispers, "This is part of becoming." From the outside, those two people may look exactly the same. Inside, they are walking toward completely different futures. Here's what most people don't understand. Your greatest battles are rarely fought against other people. They are fought against the stories you keep telling yourself. Think about this for a moment. Imagine two bricklayers working on the same building. Someone asks the first man, "What are you doing?" He answers, "I'm stacking bricks." The second man is asked the exact same question. He smiles and says, "I'm building a place where families will create memories for generations." Same bricks, same weather, same tools, completely different meaning. Meaning changes endurance. When your work has meaning, your strength expands. When your sacrifices have purpose, your patience grows deeper. When your vision becomes clear, temporary inconvenience loses much of its power. That is why principles begin with the way you see life before they ever change the way you live it. I once heard about a craftsman who carved wooden boats by hand. Every curve mattered. Every measurement mattered. A young apprentice became frustrated. "Why are you measuring this piece again? No one will ever notice." The old craftsman placed his hand gently on the unfinished boat and replied, "Maybe no one will notice today, but the ocean always notices." What a powerful lesson. Life is like the ocean. People may overlook your shortcuts. Your habits may hide for a while. Your compromises may seem harmless, but reality has a way of revealing what repetition has been creating all along. That's why principles are not about impressing people. They are about preparing yourself for reality. Reality doesn't negotiate. It simply reflects what you've practiced. If you've practiced honesty, reality builds trust. If you've practiced learning, reality offers opportunity. If you've practiced discipline, reality often places responsibility in your hands, not because life is perfectly fair, but because preparation allows you to recognize opportunities that others can't even see. Let me tell you something. Opportunity rarely knocks loudly. Most of the time, it whispers. And only prepared ears hear it. There was a young musician who spent years performing in nearly empty cafes. 5 people, sometimes 3. Occasionally, no one paid attention. People walked past. Conversations were louder than the music. Many nights he questioned whether anyone cared, yet every performance mattered to him. He tuned every instrument carefully. He practiced before every show. He thanked every listener. Someone asked him why he cared so much when almost nobody was watching. He answered, "I'm not practicing for today's audience. I'm practicing for the day opportunity finally arrives." Years later, it did. People called him an overnight success. There is no such thing. There are only years that nobody applauds. Those invisible years are where character is built. Those invisible years are where habits become identity. Those invisible years determine whether success strengthens you or overwhelms you. Think about a bamboo tree. For years after planting, almost nothing appears above the ground. Someone passing by might think nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, roots are spreading. Stability is developing. Strength is preparing for height. Then one season arrives when growth suddenly becomes visible. People celebrate what they can see. Nature celebrates what happened long before anyone noticed. How many people give up during the rooting season? How many dreams disappear because progress was invisible? Here's what most people don't understand. Invisible progress is still progress. The child learning to read doesn't notice each new connection forming inside the brain. The athlete doesn't feel every muscle adapting. The entrepreneur doesn't immediately recognize every lesson hidden inside every challenge. Growth often happens in silence before it appears in public. That should encourage you, because maybe the changes you've been hoping for are already beginning beneath the surface. Maybe your patience has grown more than you realize. Maybe your thinking has become wiser than it was a year ago. Maybe your ability to remain calm in situations that once overwhelmed you is evidence that something extraordinary is quietly taking place. We often expect transformation to announce itself. Instead, it usually introduces itself gently. One day, you respond differently to criticism. One day, you recover faster from disappointment. One day, you notice that fear no longer controls the same decisions. Those moments seem small, but they reveal that your identity has begun to change. And identity is where lasting change begins. Not with goals, with identity. Goals tell you where you want to go. Identity determines what you'll consistently do. A person who sees themselves as someone who learns doesn't need constant motivation to read. A person who sees themselves as someone who keeps promises doesn't constantly negotiate with discipline. A person who values integrity doesn't need an audience to do the right thing. Behavior follows belief. That's why changing your beliefs about yourself changes more than changing your schedule ever could. I remember speaking with an elderly teacher who had spent decades helping struggling students. Someone asked her, "How do you help children believe in themselves?" She smiled thoughtfully before answering. "I don't begin by telling them they're extraordinary. I begin by helping them keep one small promise to themselves." One small promise. Think about that. Not 10 promises. Not a complete transformation overnight. Just one promise. Write one chapter, walk 1 mile, wake up when you said you would, finish what you started. Speak kindly, shows up again tomorrow. Because every kept promise quietly introduces you to a new version of yourself. Every broken promise teaches the opposite lesson. That's why confidence isn't built by positive thinking alone. Confidence grows when your actions repeatedly prove your words can be trusted, including the words you speak only to yourself. Imagine hiring someone who constantly made promises they never kept. Eventually, your trust would disappear. Now imagine doing that to yourself for years. I'll start Monday. I'll exercise tomorrow. I'll save next month. I'll apologize later. Every delayed promise chips away at self-trust. Then people wonder why confidence feels distant. Confidence isn't always missing. Sometimes trust has simply been neglected. And trust can be rebuilt. One honest action at a time. One completed commitment at a time. One disciplined day at a time. Let me tell you another principle that quietly changes everything. Guard your environment. Not because the world is full of bad people, because environments are powerful teachers. Plant a seed in fertile soil, and its chances improve. Plant the same seed on dry concrete, and potential struggles before it even begins. Human beings are remarkably similar. The conversations surrounding you shape your thinking. The expectations surrounding you shape your effort. The standards surrounding you shape your habits. Spend enough time around people who constantly look for excuses, and excuses begin sounding reasonable. Spend enough time around people who pursue growth, and growth begins feeling normal. That's why wisdom sometimes requires changing your surroundings before changing your circumstances. There was once a young man who wanted to become healthier. He bought exercise equipment. He made detailed plans. He watched educational videos. Yet every evening he found himself sitting in the same chair, eating the same food, following the same routine. Finally, an older friend visited his home. He looked around quietly. The television dominated the room. Snacks covered the table. Exercise equipment was hidden in a closet. The friend didn't criticize him. He simply smiled and said, "Your environment is voting against your intentions." What an insightful observation. Your surroundings either reduce resistance or increase it. If wisdom is difficult to reach, but distraction is always within arm's length, which one usually wins? Not because you're weak, because environments influence behavior more than we often admit. Small changes matter. Books within reach, healthy choices visible, a notebook beside your bed, a quiet corner where reflection becomes natural. Little adjustments create remarkable momentum over time. Think about a river. It doesn't carve valleys because it's the strongest force in nature. It carves valleys because it keeps flowing in the same direction. Consistency shapes landscapes. Imagine what it can shape inside a human life. Here's something I have noticed over the years. Many people spend enormous energy trying to appear successful. Far fewer invest that same energy becoming successful. Those are different pursuits. One seeks admiration. The other seeks transformation. Admiration fades quickly. Transformation continues, working long after applause disappears. Suppose someone handed you a magnificent trophy today. It might decorate your shelf. But suppose someone handed you wisdom that improved every decision you made for the next 30 years. Which gift would truly change your life? One celebrates yesterday. The other creates tomorrow. That is why principles outlast achievements. Achievements are moments. Principles become companions. They walk with you through seasons of uncertainty, seasons of abundance, seasons of disappointment, and seasons of unexpected opportunity. They remind you who you are when emotions become loud, because emotions are valuable teachers, but unreliable leaders. If you allow every feeling to determine every decision, your direction changes with every passing wind. A sailor understands something important. The wind cannot always be controlled. The sails can. Life works much the same way. Circumstances arrive unexpectedly. Responses remain your responsibility. And once a person truly understands that distinction, something remarkable begins to happen. Complaining slowly loses its attraction. Blaming becomes exhausting. Waiting feels less satisfying than acting. You begin asking different questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this moment inviting me to become? That single shift changes everything. Because every challenge now carries possibility. Every disappointment contains instruction. Every delay becomes an opportunity to strengthen patience instead of surrendering hope. I remember hearing about an elderly clockmaker whose workshop was filled with hundreds of ticking clocks. Every sound was slightly different, yet together they created a strange harmony. A visitor asked him why he never rushed his repairs. The old man picked up a tiny spring, held it in the palm of his hand, and quietly said, "People think the hands move the clock. They don't. The smallest hidden pieces decide whether time is measured well." He wasn't only talking about clocks. He was talking about life. The conversations nobody hears, the choices nobody applauds, the disciplines nobody notices. Those hidden pieces are quietly measuring the direction of your future. And once you begin respecting those invisible moments, you start discovering that real change is not waiting for some extraordinary event to arrive from the outside. It has already begun the moment you decide that every ordinary day deserves extraordinary intention. Because from that point forward, You stop asking whether today's effort is big enough, and you begin asking a far more powerful question. If I become just a little wiser today than I was yesterday, what kind of person will I become after 100 ordinary days? Not 100 perfect days. Not 100 easy days. 100 ordinary days where you simply refuse to stop becoming. Think about that. We often imagine that life is transformed by extraordinary moments, yet most of our lives are not lived in extraordinary moments. They are lived in ordinary mornings, ordinary conversations, ordinary decisions, ordinary responses. And that is exactly where your future is being written. Let me tell you a story. There was an elderly woman who lived in a small village. Every morning before sunrise, she walked the same path carrying 2 empty buckets suspended from a wooden pole across her shoulders. One bucket was perfectly made. The other had a small crack. Every day, by the time she reached home, the cracked bucket had lost nearly half its water. For years, the cracked bucket felt ashamed. One morning, if that bucket could have spoken, it might have said, "I've failed you every single day." But the woman smiled. She pointed to one side of the road. Wild flowers, hundreds of them, bright colors stretching along the path. Then she pointed to the other side. Dry earth. Nothing growing, she quietly explained. "I knew about your crack years ago, so I planted seeds only on your side of the road." Now think about that for a moment. The very thing that looked like weakness had been creating beauty all along. How many people spend their lives trying to hide every imperfection? How many gifts remain buried because someone believed they had to become flawless before becoming useful? Here's what most people don't understand. Your imperfections do not automatically disqualify you. Ignoring them might, refusing to learn from them might, allowing them to become excuses certainly will, but acknowledging them honestly, growing through them intentionally, that creates wisdom. There is something profoundly attractive about a person who has faced their own weaknesses without allowing those weaknesses to define their identity, because such people carry humility. And humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is seeing yourself clearly enough to keep growing. I learned something from watching skilled blacksmiths. Every strike of the hammer appears violent. Metal glows with intense heat. Sparks fly in every direction. Someone unfamiliar with the process might think the metal is being destroyed. It isn't. It is being shaped. The hammer is not the enemy. The hammer is revealing what the metal can become. Life sometimes feels like that. Pressure. Unexpected changes. Responsibilities arriving before you feel ready. Criticism that stings. Moments that stretch your patience. At first, you ask, why is this happening? Then, if you remain teachable, another question slowly replaces it. What quality is this moment trying to strengthen? Perhaps patience, perhaps courage, perhaps resilience, perhaps compassion, perhaps wisdom. The challenge itself may not be the lesson. Your response almost certainly is. Imagine 2 trees standing side by side before a powerful storm. The first tree has spent years protected inside a greenhouse, perfect conditions, no strong winds, no harsh weather. The second tree has grown in open fields. It has bent with countless storms. Its roots have learned to reach deeper. When the strongest wind finally arrives, which tree remains standing? Not necessarily the tallest, not necessarily the most beautiful, the one whose roots have been strengthened through resistance. People often pray for strength, yet strength rarely develops without resistance. It's similar to learning a language. Reading one page feels insignificant. Practicing one conversation feels awkward. Mispronouncing words feels embarrassing. Yet one day you suddenly realize you're thinking in that language. The change seems sudden. It isn't. It has been quietly accumulating beneath your awareness. Growth loves accumulation. We celebrate breakthroughs because they're visible. Life celebrates preparation because it's essential. Here's another principle. that quietly changes everything. Stop negotiating with the promises you've already made. Think about how many conversations take place inside your own mind every day. The alarm rings. I'll get up in 5 minutes. The book sits on the table. I'll read later. The difficult phone call waits. Tomorrow feels better. Notice something. Very rarely are those conversations about ability. They're about negotiation. Every unnecessary negotiation consumes energy. Imagine a pilot flying across an ocean who keeps changing direction every 10 minutes. A little left, a little right, then back again. Eventually, even small changes lead to an entirely different destination. Your daily negotiations work exactly the same way. Every delay seems tiny. Every excuse appears reasonable. Every compromise feels harmless. Until years later, you discover that your destination slowly changed because your direction kept changing. Direct it matters more than speed. Someone moving slowly toward the right destination will eventually arrive. Someone moving quickly in the wrong direction simply becomes lost faster. That's why principles are like a compass. They keep correcting your course. Not once, every day. I remember hearing about a mountain guide who had spent decades leading climbers through difficult terrain. A young climber proudly announced, "I've studied every map." The guide smiled. "Good, but mountains don't always follow maps." The young man looked confused. The guide continued, "You'll need judgment, not just information." That stayed with me because we live in a time overflowing with information. Books, videos, courses, podcasts, advice from every direction. Information has never been easier to access. Wisdom remains rare. Why? Because wisdom is information tested through experience. Information tells you what could work. Wisdom reminds you what has consistently worked. There is a difference. You can read about patience. Only waiting develops patience. You can read about forgiveness. Only difficult relationships reveal whether forgiveness has become part of your character. You can read about courage. Only moments of uncertainty allow courage to become real. Knowledge informs. Experience transforms. That's why some of the wisest people speak very little. Not because they know less. Because life has taught them the value of carefully chosen words. Let me ask you something. How many conversations have changed your life? Not thousands, probably only a handful. One mentor, one teacher, one unexpected stranger, one sentence at exactly the right time, one idea that refused to leave your mind. Never underestimate the power of one meaningful conversation. In fact, perhaps you're listening today because years ago, someone believed enough in you to speak differently. Or perhaps no one did. Perhaps you've spent much of your life surrounded by voices that emphasize limitations instead of possibilities. If that's true, let me offer you another perspective. The opinions spoken over your life are not the final chapter of your life. They may explain where you've been. They do not have to determine where you're going. Imagine carrying an old suitcase everywhere. At first, it seems manageable. Year after year, people quietly place stones inside. One stone labeled, "You're not good enough." Another labeled, "You'll never change." Another labeled, "People like you don't succeed." Another labeled, "It's too late." Eventually, the suitcase becomes so heavy that walking itself feels exhausting. One day, someone asks, "Why are you carrying all that weight?" You answer, "I thought it belonged to me." How many beliefs have we accepted simply because we heard them repeatedly? Not because they were true. Because they became familiar. Familiarity is powerful. People often confuse familiar with accurate. They are not the same. That's why examining your beliefs matters. Every belief becomes a lens. Every lens shapes perception, and perception influences action. Suppose two people stand before the same closed door. One believes, "This door proves I should quit." The other believes, "This door is inviting me to find another entrance." Same door, different belief, different future. Life often responds to interpretation, before it responds to talent. Because interpretation determines persistence. Da for density multiplies skill. Skill creates opportunity. Opportunity rewards preparation. Everything begins connecting. Principles are never isolated. One strengthens another. Discipline strengthens confidence. Confidence encourages action. Action creates experience. Experience develops wisdom. Wisdom improves decisions. Better decisions reshape life. It's like building a stone bridge across a wide river. No single stone reaches the other side, but every carefully placed stone makes the next one possible. Eventually, people admire the completed bridge. Very few appreciate the patience required to place the first stone. Think about your own life. What is your first stone? Not your 100th. Not the bridge. Just the next stone. Maybe it's waking 30 minutes earlier. Maybe it's reading instead of scrolling. Maybe it's having the conversation you've avoided for months. Maybe it's writing the first page instead of waiting to write the perfect chapter. Maybe it's choosing gratitude in a season where complaining has become a habit. Small stones, strong bridges. I once met a watch repairer whose workbench was covered with tiny gears, springs, and screws, so small they could disappear beneath a fingertip. A customer asked him, "How do such tiny pieces matter so much?" The old repairer smiled and gently placed the smallest gear into the movement. Immediately, the entire watch came to life. He looked up and said, "People admire the hands because they move, but the hands move only because invisible parts remain faithful." That sentence followed me for years. Invisible faithfulness, showing up when nobody notices, preparing when nobody applauds, improving when nobody expects it. That is where remarkable lives are quietly built, not under bright lights, but in quiet moments where character chooses consistency over convenience. And once you begin seeing life through that lens, you stop asking whether anyone else recognizes your effort, because you understand that the person being shaped by today's choices is the one who must live with tomorrow's consequences. Suddenly, every morning becomes more than another date on the calendar. It becomes another opportunity to cast a vote for the kind of human being you're becoming. And the beautiful thing about those votes is that no single one seems dramatic on its own, yet over months and years, they begin to reveal an identity so strong that when unexpected opportunities finally appear, people wonder how you became so ready, never realizing that readiness was never created in a single moment. It was patiently assembled through thousands of decisions that looked too small to matter. Until one day, someone places a responsibility in your hands that would have overwhelmed the person you used to be. But the person you've quietly been becoming smiles, takes a slow breath, steps forward, and says, "There was a time when I would have been afraid of this moment. There was a time when I would have questioned myself. There was a time when I would have looked for someone else to lead, someone else to decide, someone else to believe." But that person no longer lives here, because every ordinary day became a workshop. Every disappointment became a teacher. Every setback became a lesson. Every small promise I kept became another brick in the foundation of my character. And that is what I want for you. Not a life without challenges, not a life without uncertainty, but a life built on principles so strong that when the storms come, and they will come, you remain standing. Think about a lighthouse. The purpose of a lighthouse is not to stop the storm. It cannot calm the waves. It cannot silence the wind. It cannot remove the darkness. Its purpose is to stand steady, reliable, faithful, night after night, year after year. Ships find their way, not because the storm disappears, but because the light remains. Let me tell you something. The world does not need more people who shine only when life is easy. It needs people whose character remains bright when circumstances become difficult. People whose integrity is not for sale. People whose kindness survives disappointment. People whose discipline does not depend on applause. People who continue planting seeds even when the harvest is still invisible. Those people change families. They change communities. They change generations. I want you to imagine yourself many years from now. Imagine looking back over your life, not at your possessions, not at your titles, not at the number of people who knew your name, but at the person you became.